Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Data Science Hangout. If you're joining for the first time, it's great to meet you. I'm Rachel Dempsey. I'm the host of the Data Science Hangout. If this is your first time, what is this? It's an open space for the whole data science community to connect and chat about data science leadership, questions you're all facing, and really just what's going on in the world of data science. So we really want to create spaces where everybody can participate and we can hear from everyone. So there's a few ways that you can ask questions today. You can always ask questions anonymously through the Slido link, which Robert will share in the chat in just a second here. You can raise your hand on Zoom and I could just call on you. Or you could also put questions into the Zoom chat. And if you want me to read them out loud instead of you, you can just put a little star next to your question too. But I do like to reiterate, we want to hear from everybody, no matter your level of experience or the industry that you work in. So feel free to use the chat there, ask questions any way that works for you. But I am so happy to be joined by my co-host for today, Joseph Korszun. And Joseph, I might need a lesson in saying your last name, Manager of Data Science at ProCogia. And Joseph, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about the work that you do.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Rachel. Happy to be here, and thank you all for joining as well. Yeah, my name is Joe. You did pronounce my last name correctly. It is Korszun. Kudos there. But yeah, I am the manager of data science at ProCogia. My role primarily is, delivering engagement for our clients, making sure consultants are kind of on track. I help out with a little bit of code review here or there, but for the most part, I'm kind of a deliverables manager. I have oversight on progression as well for consultants, making sure they're on the correct trajectory for their career path as well. Internal development's big, so that's kind of a little bit about my role.
Awesome, thank you. It'd be great to hear a little bit more about what the team looks like as well and how many data scientists there are.
Sure. So I do manage a little bit of a variety of data scientists. There's some bioinformaticians, genomicists on the team. I have a few data analytics stragglers in there too. But yeah, so primarily I manage a team of 16. That's going to be bumping up to 18 right now. Their work kind of varies depending on their role and expertise. Some people do ML ops, ML engineering. There's some data engineers as well on that team that specialize either in Azure, AWS. We have some Google Cloud Platform gurus on the team as well. But yeah, day-to-day, a lot of variety within the team and kind of the role in general.
Great, thank you. I see Robert put a question into the chat off the bat. This is one we used to ask in the beginning. So what are you super excited about right now in data science?
Well, just kind of the opportunities, right? There's so many problems in the world that data science can solve, whether that be supply chain, cancer research. There's a lot of improvements that can be made in the world today. And I think, that comes through automation initiatives, but eventually you need an understanding of the data set in itself. So first and foremost, I think, we identify a problem, we look for a little bit of a solution to the problem, and then kind of let that be self-sufficient, right? So I think it has a lot of opportunity to help.
Awesome. Sam, I know you put a question to the chat. If you want to jump in and ask that live.
Hey, Joseph, just a quick question. So what led you to join leadership and become a manager of data scientists?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a difficult leap, I would say. I found myself being a little bit passionate about, diving into some code, understanding a problem at hand, but those don't really change too much. You're just a little bit more hands off. You have more of a variety of problems, but the thing that led me to help others is, exactly that, right? There's more of an opportunity to help develop people, round out some skill sets, identify maybe some weaknesses, some strengths where others can actually help one another as well. So that's a little bit of part of my role as well. So I'd say that's the most satisfying and what really led me to take on a little bit more leadership.
And did you say 6 before or 16? People.
16.
16. Wow.
We are a fast growing firm. Last year, I believe we doubled in size. We're on a similar pace this year. So I imagine that, kind of reduces over time. But for now, that's the total.
Can I ask you, how do you manage professional development and keep track with 16 different people?
Yeah. So it's a little bit challenging, but I think you kind of face similar challenges with smaller size teams as well, right? So with a smaller firm, we are kind of considered a startup still for the most part. It brings about more opportunity. So more senior people, they look for more of those leadership roles, those tech lead roles as well. Just kind of a mix between that batch. But for the most part, the more junior analysts or data scientists, they all have a little bit of a pain point where they need to round out some skills. For me, I try to see where people sit currently, benchmark that a little bit, look for areas of improvement. I conduct one-on-ones. I try to, be on top of the day-to-day workload for them as well. I don't want them being overwhelmed. Gradual progression is probably the easiest route to take for most people. So daily one-on-one check-ins, check-ins for the project as well. A lot of my calendar is filled with meetings, we'll say.
I see there are a lot of questions coming in the chat around management too, and one was a follow-up to Sam's question. Zach, do you want to jump in?
Yep, can do. So yeah, it seems a lot of questions about this. Like, of course, traditionally, as you progress in your career, you turn into a manager. I was just wondering, do you miss the coding side of it? I looked in your LinkedIn and you were a data scientist for about a year. So before moving up. So I presume it's just natural career progression. But you said you weren't very hands-on these days. So I was wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, so there's opportunities, not within your daily profession to still establish some professional development if you're looking to enhance your technical abilities. Part of being a manager as well is, being experienced with, or at least have a baseline understanding of some of the technology that's currently in development, right? So moving to more cloud platforms, I think I've been learning a little bit more about data engineering, upping my Linux skills as well on the side. So it doesn't, fall off the table. You still want to make sure you're up to date with the latest technology, understanding how some of that works, going through some tutorials as well. So I don't think it really just completely falls off the table. It's just not part of your day-to-day life anymore. But there's always opportunity. The continued curiosity is a big thing that I don't think ever really leaves you.
I like that. Continued curiosity. I see, Andreas, you had a similar question. I think it was maybe answered in that, but do you have any follow-up question?
I think it was mostly answered. Yeah, I was just wondering the mix of managing and actually still hands-on technical parts, and if you sort of have a deliberate way of doing this, or is it just whatever happens?
Well, I think it's kind of where the company's at as well, where I look to round out some of my skill sets. If it is ML ops, understanding how pipeline development works, eventually data scientists get a firm understanding of, statistics, and, that technical knowledge doesn't leave you too quickly, thankfully. But the programmatic side of things, helping out with code, there's always going to be somebody on the team that is going to be more proficient at you at coding. So I don't think part of my role day to day will entail being that expert anymore, I would say. But you still need to have a little bit of a firm base as to how things work on a high level.
I love all these questions that are coming in immediately. Everybody's ready to go today. I see there was an anonymous question that was about your background and what led you to this field.
Sure. Yeah, I want to point back to curiosity, I would say. Through my progression, I think I started off doing some economics during my initial master's. I think that was in business intelligence and analytics. At the time, analytics was still relatively new. I'm showing my age a little here. But you got some deep dive understanding of how AI would work. Understanding some Python implementation. but the continued development, I would say for me is I wanted to get more, I want to take a little bit of a step back, I would say. So statistics is pretty much a lot by hand. You might use SAS a little bit. R is very common as well for statistical programming. But the inferential side, I was trying to understand things from a business perspective. I wanted to take a little bit of a step back, like see what I can get from some of these assumptions, tests that you perform. So I would say my progression is just hopping around a little bit, seeing what fits well, trying to master a skill set at a given period, and continuously moving forward, I would say is the biggest challenge. Where's the next step for you in your career as well? So it's kind of my progression.
Thanks, Joe. There's a lot of great questions coming in the chat too. And Libby, I see you had a comment about the job landscape today. Would you want to jump in and ask that question?
Sure. So I've been talking to lots of people on teams around, kind of in our R space where they're really hiring just seniors or not really looking for anybody who's junior because they don't have the seniors in place to grow juniors yet. And I've been curious if that's been a challenge that maybe you faced in your org.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a pain point, I would say, getting more senior people in there. But part of the progression aspect with larger firms is maybe these more senior people aren't given the opportunity to mentor more junior analysts, programmers. So we try to give them that opportunity. So internally, we've tried to take some of our senior people, do a little bit of, a weekly hands-on coding session with some of them, understanding how some of these data science techniques work. Maybe for R, understanding some new packages that are being established in the field. I think a lot of our work centers around bioconductor right now. But I would say, giving those people an opportunity, continuously looking is is probably my advice, but a lot of people are just looking to help others in today's society. So giving them that opportunity, showcasing that your firm's really about that, I think will help retain and acquire some of the key talent that you're looking for.
Awesome, thanks.
I see, Steve, you asked a question earlier, which I think might help provide us all context too. Do you want to ask that?
Sure, yes. Just trying to understand also what your data scientists are actually using as a platform. What hardware are you doing it in-house or is it in the cloud? What environments do you provide to your data scientists?
Sure. We are a consulting firm, so it kind of depends on the client that they're in as well. So in-house, we do have a little bit of a playground in AWS going forward. So that's primary target for us internally. We want to continue, getting people acclimated with some of these tools AWS offers. Spinning up EC2 instances is a big thing. The parallel processing compute. So I think that's kind of the direction we're taking internally. But depending on the consultant, it's kind of where the firm they're allocated to and the use cases there for what tools are given. But most of them are on cloud. They're either Azure, it seems primarily, or AWS, given those are our partner networks.
Thanks, Joe. And on that topic, there was also an anonymous question. What's the mix of BI tools versus coding tools at your company? And how have you navigated the perception that they are one and the same?
Yeah, so I think we primarily have Tableau and Microsoft Power BI. I think we have more Power BI developers than Tableau at this point. But they're not going to be one and the same. Tableau and Power BI are easy to develop key visuals for business objectives. I would say Python are both of those languages are geared towards understanding what's going on with a data set at a given time. So when it comes to presentation, continual integration, dashboards, visualizations, they're great, especially for automation initiatives. So we do encourage some of our data scientists to, be familiar with some of those visualization tools. They're very key for business objectives, relaying information to stakeholders. So identifying the differences there, I would say, perform some of your inferential analysis, exploratory analysis with code. When you're ready to kind of present that to somebody else, that's when the visualization should take form.
Thank you. Really feeling the energy from everybody in the chat today, which I really needed this morning. So thank you. Aaron, I see you had a comment and question in the chat too. Would you want to jump in?
Yeah, just real quick, I'll just introduce myself. I'm an engineer for a railroad maintenance company, and I've been doing that quite a while. I'm a PE and all that. And recently I was paired up with a data scientist, somebody kind of like what you've described yourself. And I was given some work to do with him and really enjoyed it. And ended up moving to work with him. It started off as he kind of came to me with some, how do you do this and that? And I gave him all these best Excel sheets. And eventually I moved to his group, and now I'm in his group. And it's a bit tough learning how to code. I never formally was taught how to code, but it's going very well. I'm just a little curious, how do you have people to work under you who have maybe a lot of some skills but zero coding skills, and how do you encourage them to kind of go on their own with that sort of thing if you do that? I don't know if that's if you have anybody like how I've described myself and where I am right now. And yeah, if you have any comment, then that'd be nice to hear. I don't know if yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have people that are, unfamiliar with some semblance of coding. I think at any point in your career, you've written a formula in Excel. So just learning to translate that into, more usable scripts, I would say. So how I develop people and enhancing their programmatic efficiency, again, kind of pairing them with somebody else. But, I think it starts with identifying what their determined career path is from their own perspective, right? So some people, they want to be more statistics oriented. They want to either be, more ML engineering oriented, right? So you have to understand, like, where's the focal point for their career going forward? What's the pain point that they have right now? What's the quickest way to kind of upskill them in that sense? So the most recent case that I have is we had somebody that really wanted to, get into more of the architectural design space. So, getting them familiar with some of the tutorials, just having them do some hands-on labs. I think it's more beneficial than watching videos, reading textbooks. You're actually getting, down and dirty with some of the code, and you're going to have errors along the way. That's the most important thing. I don't think anybody's not written a script that didn't function the first time. So having an understanding that there are going to be errors along the way, giving them the resources that they need, whether they're a visual learner, if they do prefer textbooks, that's okay. Some of the more stats-oriented people, I would say, prefer more text from what I've seen. More of the engineers, maybe a little bit more of the visuals, documentation, just a little bit of a hybrid approach. So providing them the resources that they need, understanding where's the initial pain point in development, and just giving them the tools, pairing them with someone that may have that skill set. If they don't, that's okay. We can guide them and make sure that they're understanding what they're reading is actually what they're putting into practice.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I do have a coworker who's helped me out a little bit, more of an entry-level guy, but again, knows more coding than I do. And I'm going to that conference at the end of July too. So that's looking forward to that very much. Thank you.
Nice. So Celine, I see you have your hand raised. If you want to jump in.
Hi, sorry, I'm new to this group. First time I come in. Anyway,
welcome. Thanks for joining.
I heard some bloops about like how to mentor, new coders. I've done that a lot. And one thing that surprises me all the time with new coders is they feel uncomfortable just Googling and copy pasting large chunks of code from the web. So that's just, I know it's a silly thing, but I feel like that unblocks new coders, that you don't have to code everything from scratch. You can literally search it, Google it, copy, paste it, and adapt it to your problem. And for some reason, that's something that new coders feel reluctant to do.
That's a great point. I've felt that myself as well. And I know we've talked a bit on here about code snippets too, and being able to share with others across the team. I see there, let me just jump over to some of these other questions here too. Javier, I noticed you asked a question around Joe's experience at RIT. Do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, so I am graduating this semester. I am wrapping up some of my work there. I think I have my intro course, so I've already made way through all the other material, and I'm also writing my thesis this semester as well. So,
do you
And
feel
how,
like that's helped you sort of in your management role, or even just as a data science team member? Specifically the stats masters, because I saw that you had another master's.
yeah, so I think both actually do help. I didn't really plan to, step into the managerial space. It just seemed to be where I was needed the most. So I'm always willing to help out others, but for my own progression, the stats masters does help. Just because it's a little bit of a different approach than, say, machine learning engineer or a typical data scientist is learning in school now. If you've seen some of the degrees coming up, they're data science, business analytics, ML engineering, right? All of those have a little bit more specialization in one key area or not. So I would say, a combination of both the business intelligence and analytics degree helps really solidify the business foundation understanding for myself. And I do like to highlight a little bit with this development too. Some of the data scientists, it's a little bit different way of thinking, right? So some of them start off with a problem. They look for, what are these key features going into this model? So I kind of approach it from a statistical perspective in that sense. But from a business perspective, right? What's our key objective that we have? Can we work back from there and establish some sort of understanding of the data set in itself? So there's two ways to approach a problem. One is more linear, and then the other one's kind of working your way back, have an understanding of what's our end goal here. What do we want to establish, and how do we get to that objective? So I would say both help quite well. I think the statistics is a little bit more. I have a little bit more of an understanding for starting off with nothing and just seeing what we can understand from the given problem at hand.
awesome, thank you. I see there are a lot of comments around mentorship and the way that other people are teaching others on their team. So I just want to go back and kind of circle around that point as well, and what Celine brought up. But I see, Libby, you had a question around maybe not being as senior, but wanting to mentor people. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. I think it's more of a mental blockage, like that you have to get past. And I think it's also something that maybe women in data science struggle with, maybe more than men. I'm not going to generalize everybody, but it's a common feeling for me where I think like, oh, I don't have anything to give anybody else, but I have the desire to. And when I talk to other data scientists that are kind of at my level or below, they're constantly telling me like, you know so much more than you let on. Like you're way more capable than you're letting on to me that you are. Like you have all these things to share. But not being a senior and not being a lead, it feels like a presumptuous thing to do, to reach out and want to talk to other people. But I'm getting over it slowly. Any tips on that would be great, especially because we all come from different backgrounds, right? Like they're all things that even if we're the same level, that we have different specializations in.
Really. And I see Celine you had your hand raised as well, if that was in response to Libby's question.
It was. So I find that the feel of incompetency, I get that. I actually might be interesting. I actually learned R by teaching it. So I had no clue. I mostly work with R, but I had no clue from the start. But what I did do is I had people that I was teaching, and I would teach something that I just learned, and I would ask them to come with their problems to me. And then if I couldn't solve it, I had like a person that I had established contact with that I would go to solve that problem, and come back to the mentorees. And that worked for me because you learn from other people's problems, and you also like teach things that or that you almost feel comfortable with. So that was my structure in the
That's
early
awesome.
days.
Thank you.
Early days, like you need one contact person that you can go to if you don't know, and then you can teach what you do know to who you're mentoring, and they know that you can get information if you don't have it.
That's good feedback. I think I need to find that at work. That's something that when I was in an academic setting was really easy, right? Like I could tutor other people. There was a big need for it. So I tutored all through grad school. And I tutored all through undergrad too. And that was something that I did on a weekly basis. But then when I got to work, all of it stopped. I didn't have anybody to tutor. There were no assignments that they needed help with, right? And people are a little bit less likely maybe to reach out with specific problems on things that they're doing. Maybe they don't want to look like they need help because this is their job. This isn't a homework assignment. So it's definitely like a shift that has to happen in the team mindset as well for other people to be open to it, perhaps. This is a great conversation. Thank you so much, Celine.
Another thing that I do regularly is when I discover something and it, something new that I didn't know, I usually present it to the team. And so, they might know it, but that puts a learning kind of aspect to the team, and they will put forward stuff that they just discovered, a new package or a new, whatever. So I think that also helps team learning.
For sure. Yeah, we just implemented some knowledge sharing sessions ourselves, trying to get into that mindset of like everybody sharing.
Definitely. And I see, Mike, you're adding a few tips into the chat too, if you want to jump in. Or I can read some of them. But a lot was around that, like learning out loud, as you both mentioned, like sharing new things that you're learning. And I think Mike was pointing to how Mara from our studio does that on Twitter. But Joe, oh, there you go.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I really think there's power in learning out loud. Most people are experts at a very, very, very narrow field. And so if you learn something, you can typically pass it on to many people and they'll go, oh, wow, I hadn't known that. That's fantastic. The other thing I saw just today was that there was a psychology type poll about learning and asking for help. And it found that 44% of people won't reach out for help in case it makes them look like they don't know what they're doing. But that means that 44% of people aren't asking for help when they need it. So if you're ready, it means that you can help a lot of people, because there's a huge number out there who really need help and are just too afraid to kind of fess up, come forward and say, actually, I do need some help here. Or they'll figure it out themselves.
That's a great point, Mike. It's a community service.
I want to touch base a little bit on this. So you got to be mindful that, everybody's going to be a little different too in your workplace. So, you can have as much technical ability as you want, but if you're struggling to find people that are willing to reach out for that help, that's kind of the pain point in itself, right? So it seems like you're on track for community involvement within the organization, but the culture is a big thing. You want to, build foundational skill sets, but you want to make sure the transparency between people is something that's, within the workplace too. If they're not comfortable reaching out to a manager, that's okay. There are other people that I'm sure they could be paired with that, would help them with their problem. So just be mindful, I would say, of every individual. Some people don't like to reach out just because it's in their personality, right? So you have to have an understanding that all people are going to be a little bit different. But we all have similar goals, right? We want to continue to move forward, continue to progress. So I think you have some semblance of a relationship there just based on that.
And Joe, how does it, oh, you go ahead, Mike.
So I'm also thinking of, what Joseph just said reminds me of J.D. Long's stuff about empathy. So J.D. Long tweets as C mastication or cerebral mastication. And he has presented at our studio conference about empathy and how if you approach people with problems with empathy, folks are looking for someone kind to come alongside, cut them some slack and help them out. So yeah, if you wade in, hey, look how much I know, I'm going to beat you over the head with this, you'll never win friends.
You're not going to know it all too. That's part of it, right? So there's no real reason to treat it as such, I would say.
definitely. And I imagine you have this culture of helping each other on your team with so many data scientists, but I'm curious what that looks like for your team.
Sure. A lot of it, it may be segmented out a little, depending on where people are located, what firm they're allocated to. But I do encourage, we have some ML tutorials going on. I'm looking to establish more of the data engineering tutorials. But I want to foster this community culture. So that's the biggest takeaway. Everybody has their own trajectory that they're looking for, giving them kind of a buddy system of somebody that's a little bit more senior following that pathway or have already been through that struggle. I can provide as much resource, as much guidance as I can. Community, external events are a big team builder too. So you want to have a relationship with people in person. You want to have, that relationship virtually as well for the specifics, the foundational skill sets. Open office hours too, they're very crucial, I would say, for certain people. So all of those in combination, I would say, help kind of foster this continual learning objective that I'm trying to establish internally. And I've seen pretty good success out of it. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Maybe shifting gears a little bit, I see Matthew asked a question on data engineering versus data science tasks. Would you want to jump in and add your extra context there?
Oh boy, and you caught me just as I was stuffing M&Ms in my
mouth.
so
No. Oh, I
thanks,
want some
M&Ms. That's not a good replacement for lunch. Yeah, I guess, in my organization, I'm in an early stage data science team, and we live outside of IT. We're actually a research function. So it's a little bit interesting, and we're reliant on IT for data warehouse graduating into a data lake, and there's an ebb and flow there, and we try to keep our distance from those data management activities, but at the same time we often say, okay, kind of have to go commando or have to go a little workaround and band-aids, and negotiating that to what extent. And I'm just curious about other people's experiences with this. We're living in our own little bubble, and it's like, the pushback, the ebb and flow, and techniques to keep focused on the science versus this infrastructure aspect.
Well,
there's no easy answer. I know. I'm mostly like looking to commiserate and hear about other people's challenges, I guess.
Sure. I think, everybody's going to be working together too, from my perspective, right? So the data scientist should have an understanding of the architecture that's being developed, right? There's parameter checks as well, dealing with that infrastructure build. So something to keep in mind is, what's the intent of working with the data? So I don't think it's just a complete migration. You want to make sure utility is going to be maximized as well from your analyst data scientists. So I would almost, encourage a little bit of, overlap between the groups, at least for input, making sure everything's kind of, you want to make sure qualification of the system essentially is up to par. So I think there's a little bit of input that's needed.
Input, and perhaps, talking about empathy, going back and saying, okay, look, we're all working on this together. Let's help each other out by actually being a team and being colleagues. And unfortunately, that's going a long way as opposed to staffing up.
Yeah. Chris, I saw you had some thoughts on this in the chat too, if you want to weigh in.
Sure. It's interesting because I'm just wrapping up an engagement with a data engineering consultancy, which we used to help our small team move into the cloud some of our ETL processes. But ultimately, we are still responsible for them. Our IT doesn't help. We don't have data engineering teams, and none of the companies I've been at have had data engineering functions when we've been there. So the teams I've been on have always been responsible for that, for better or for worse. Many times for worse, sometimes for better. I've sort of developed my own philosophies on how to do this that would probably make data engineers' eyes roll to the back of their head. But it's about optimizing around the way I want to be able to work, which is, try to distill this down quickly, I want to always have the data ready at hand. If I could anticipate the kinds of requests that are going to come up in the future, to front load the gathering of that data in advance, and then automate the collection of it, even if it's not particularly sophisticated. And then I basically want to minimize the time of every new project that is spent on data collection and data engineering. And so how you get there can be different ways, but by optimizing to the analytics approach later, generally speaking, I'm able to do the work on the projects I'm working on pretty quickly, because the adage of like, you're going to spend 80% of your time collecting the data doesn't apply if you did the work in advance to build up the data sets that you're going to need later.
Thanks, Chris. I see Melody, you just put a comment into the chat too, that you're experiencing something similar. If you want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, not too much to say, that probably a lot of us have, experienced, or at least for those of us in like sort of the government area, public health, is horribly underfunded, and IT is just a whole other field in the realm of public health. So yeah, that has been, definitely a struggle for us as well. And I just put in the chat, we're trying to focus on, increasing knowledge and training for our IT teams as well, just to try to get everyone up to speed, try to, increase the knowledge base, and just kind of try to get, support in the way that we need, because it's true. I mean, you're pretty much dead in the water if you don't have the right infrastructure set up, and the right people to support that infrastructure. So little plug for public health, make sure you vote for more funding, so that we can all do better here.
Thanks, Melody. I don't want to shift gears too quickly if people have other thoughts or things to add to this discussion too.
Yep. Hey,
yeah, jump in, Steve.
I'll just comment, because I'm the interloper here, because I'm really an IT person, not a data scientist person, but I have to support people who want these environments in order to be able to do the data science. So I'm quite interested in that that interface layer between the users, the people that want to actually use the products which we'll implement, and how we get that working. Because obviously the traditional IT department isn't well suited to doing the sorts of work which you do. And that's where we're, things like DevOps and being a lot more responsive to users' requirements, and actually getting users direct as we're developing the products, as we're implementing our studio environments, getting engagement as early as possible along with our users is really critical. So as we're developing the platform and rolling out new versions, we're continually trying to engage with the users and say, well, what features do you need? Are you happy with the way this looks? What extra libraries are you going to need? How do you want to interact with us? i.e., do you want to raise a service ticket, or do you just want to post a message on a bulletin board saying, hey, this library is needed? So it's quite interesting to see how IT interfaces with users, and it's that sort of almost like developer-oriented IT, which is relatively new. Well, not that new, but it's now of greater focus.
Thanks, Steve. I think we're all excited now to ask questions to IT with you saying that. Can I ask you, what does that process look like within your organization? Like, do you have one point of contact on the end user side that you work with?
So we have a product manager for doing R stuff and data science. We have lots of key users scattered about. So I work for a very large agrochemical company. So we have big central heavyweight IT departments, but then lots of little sort of offshoots and little group clusters of engineers who go around to help people. So we're more on the research side. So we're trying to sweep up users who are interested in RStudio, Neo4j, Mongo, and Mondo. All of the little things, and trying to say, can we do this better than you're actually doing it yourself? So we have a lot of users who will actually start up their own environment and get it running, and now they want to keep it maintained and don't really have the time because they're supposed to be doing their day work. So we, as a sort of relatively lean team, come in and leap in and say, how can we actually make that a bit more stable environment and have so you've got the thing working, now let's take over responsibility for patching it and making sure it's up to date, and also creating a community around each of the products. So we'll have an RStudio team, Teams group where people can ask questions about RStudio. Similarly, we'll have a focus on R and Python and other sort of like technical areas. Then people can actually, if they're interested, they can join that community and engage, and hopefully some of us will be scattered about those groups to be able to sweep up saying, oh yeah, that's an IT related issue which we can help with. But our problems also have that our main big IT departments aren't interested in this sort of user engagement. And that's we think is a big failing, because they will run a giant GitLab server, and that's great, but they don't patch it. Well, no, we run a little pirate GitLab server which we patch on a regular basis, and people tend to come to us. So you can't stand up a service unless you're willing to provide a full service around that, and that's that engagement with the users. So just finishing a project is not the end of the project.
Yes. So. Steve, I think we're all going to have to pick your brain on some of that later as well too. Thank you.
I'm learning this as I'm going along as well. So this is all. There's a lot of stuff which is, we're learning. We're doing a big AWS project, so we're rolling out RStudio with Terraform and Ansible and other sort of like cool bits of technologies which we're learning about as we go along. And it's very difficult to actually, a lot of this information, there's snippets available on the internet. So we're having to work this out all by ourselves. So we're also, although we're a little sort of pirate offshoot doing all this stuff, we're still also trying to learn as we go along.
Yeah, thank you. I see there is a few other anonymous questions that came in earlier, Joe, and one was, would love to hear a cool success story of something you delivered for a client. And they said, I love fun data stories.
So in my previous role, I would say, was this a personal question or a company question, or either?
I think it maybe was company question, but it's probably could be either. So whatever one is most fun for you to tell. How about?
Oh, we had a recent somebody reached out to us, a firm. They were working, establishing some on-prem servers, configuring RStudio Workbench, trying to establish an RStudio Connect as well. They ran into a bunch of issues. Eventually reached out to us. To provision ensure that their provision servers were indeed functioning correctly with their RStudio Workbench. Connect, they could publish with some version control as well. And it took us a little bit longer than I would say, but diving into the deep nitty-gritty of the problem itself, whether it be a config file, whether it be a firewall prevention, right? We wanted to make sure that we rounded out some of these understandings of the problem at hand. It wasn't one central problem as we were kind of under the impression of at the time, but that was a huge victory for us. I had somebody kind of working with one of our more senior DevOps. She ended up developing very quickly. And I would say that was a major win for us, just because of the problem at hand. The client was exceptionally happy, I would say. Once the issues were resolved, they were able to, get on Workbench, write to some shiny applications to the Connect server. So it's a happy moment, I would say, when, a very simple problem, it seems, turns into a little bit more of a challenge than you expected, and you're able to kind of persevere and get over kind of the last step there, making sure the implementation is up to par and users are happy with the end product you delivered. So as a company, that was something that I was exceptionally proud of, just based on the difficulty of the few issues at hand.
Thanks, Joe. Another anonymous question from earlier was, for life sciences consulting, what are your thoughts on hiring people with the relevant domain expertise? Is it important or not so important?
Yeah, so I think right now we've just been focusing on building out the infrastructure there. So we've been targeting people with the domain expertise for now. Again, kind of, somebody mentioned previously struggling to find more senior people. I think you want to start with the senior people that are willing to kind of take on that leadership role, potentially move into beyond the current technical lead that they are at the point in their career. But just getting somebody in that's more senior, it has that domain expertise, it helps build a lot quicker than somebody, with a lot more variety. Maybe they have some semblance of an idea of and some RNA-seq analysis, something like that. But we look to build out some junior people too, but it starts with building a firm foundation. I always like to, circle back to understanding the foundational skill set and building up from there. But you need to have a firm base with what you start with if you're looking to build out that sector.
Thank you. Sloan, I see you just put a question into the chat. Would you want to ask that one live?
Sure. Sorry, I had to find my unmute button.
No worries.
So I work on a team, data analytics and data science team that's within IT. And there's been some discussion on moving us outside of IT. And I have seen in the chat that there are a lot of people talking about some of the cons of being outside of IT, but I guess I was curious about some of the positives. And I thought that Mathew's comment, just undermine, is a very strong positive that I know that we would probably benefit from. But I'm curious what other perspectives are out there.
Sure. Cool.
So most of my analytics has actually been outside of IT. Been on a data science team of 15 people, some of smaller ones, but you need a strong leader. And the most successful one that I've been on, we had our own data engineering resources. Data science doesn't get done without data engineering. And I've been in organizations where you don't even get any data engineering support. And it's kind of a complete nightmare. They look at data science as, you guys are just a corner case. We're going to take care of the rest of the organization first. And it's kind of like, well, then you're not going to get any innovation or data science out of us then. That's sort of the reality of it. And I've been in the middle of it too. So I've seen like all three sides of that coin. And it works extremely well as its own organization, especially when you have someone on the business side, or at least someone strong in the business side and domain side in charge, that has also a bit of the tech background. Because I've seen organizations where you have a pure business person, but they don't really understand what everybody's doing. You explain to them, look, this is really complicated. This is a mess, or the data's a mess. Or, so it isn't, you're not going to hear, oh, this will just take you. And then it's like, yeah, here we go. There is that, I'm going to select star from perfectly clean data set where everything is perfect. And I'm going to do the analysis in 20 minutes. That doesn't exist. But so I like it outside of IT. I think there's a lot of other stuff going on in IT that you don't need to be bothered with.
Thanks, Brian. I know, Joe, you were about to weigh in here as well, if you have other thoughts.
I see the pros and cons to each situation here. I like IT primarily working a little bit closer, especially people building out the infrastructure. I think it's good to kind of, get a requirements gathering session and like the continual integration, continual development, right? What are the pain points in the system that we've established already? What needs to be enhanced? It's hard to say from an engineering perspective whether it's kind of cost effective. Unless you're understanding a little bit about the analysis techniques that are being applied to the day-to-day work. My 2 cents there.
Thanks, Joe.
Hey,
I see.
Rachel, can I just
Yeah.
add one thing to that, if you don't mind?
Of course, I love when people jump in.
I have only been in analytics and data science capacities outside of like core IT. And part of that is because most of my experience is in like financial modeling. So, it's interesting, the like projects where I feel data scientists or, analytics engineers within IT orgs, the projects where they really shine, where you're like, wow, this is an amazing concept that you guys have implemented. I feel like they're usually more, this is my experience, I feel like they're usually more back-end related, where they're using ML or AI like in a very advanced way to make data more consumable for the entire org, including data scientists. Whereas my experience being like in these roles completely outside of IT, I kind of see that the focus is much more on some type of visual storytelling app or presentation or something like this. So the nature of the like business problems that we're trying to solve are just inherently different. I tend to like that aspect more because I really do enjoy sort of the shiny app building or like the visualization aspect of data science. But I've talked to others at my last company, especially, who like had zero interest in that. They really kind of thrived with more of like, the NLP or some of the back-end systems. Anyway, just wanted to chime in with that.
Thank you, Javier. That's helpful. I see, Matthew, you had some more thoughts on this too, if you want to add into that.
I'm happy to toil away in the background, of course, but I think something that's fun, I was responding to a comment from Melody, just in talking internally and having these inside outside IT functions, working with IT and my team, we recently stumbled on the phrase, we refer to ourselves as transformers, and thinking of it's actually, I'm not even close to an engineer, but electrical, step up, step down. And it's a way of leveraging the power of data and technology to support decision making by our subject matter experts and business colleagues, but also the other way too. We have an infamous case at my organization asking about usage information, where there was a head of our basically account management went directly to a database engineer asking for usage information. And I have great respect for everybody on all sides of this, but it was a bit of the old adage of GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, right? She got back a spreadsheet that had usage data and said, what am I supposed to do with this? And so that's an infamous case here, where it's like, okay, the data science team, we come in and we get to an understanding of your problems so that you don't work directly with IT, because then we can help shape and standardize the problem to be able to get closer to decision making. And so transformers, we're having a lot of fun with it, but not trying to reference any kind of recent movies with lens flares or explosions.
Thanks, Matthew. See, people like that transformers concept.
It follows also, they select some of the sort of keywords from last few years have disruptive technologies, and I think my take is that traditional IT departments aren't suited for this, and it's always better if you can do something, if you can show something and produce a little sort of nifty little product and then show the IT department, look, I can do this. Then they can actually then take a step, they can hopefully take a step back and say, right, can we recognize can we recognize how useful this is and take a look inwards and say, are we the right sort of IT organization to be able to better support people like this? And I think traditionally, big IT departments aren't appropriate for this. And what you have to think about is, okay, if we no longer have, if the big IT department has become a giant dinosaur by itself, can we think of something which will better facilitate our people to do work? Now that might mean creating better communications, having more appropriate Slack channels, having discussions and having an environment which is more mentoring and helpful to people rather than these big legacy monolithic IT departments. So the question isn't whether or not you do it inside or outside IT, you do it. If you can find a tool which is useful to you, use it. Then maybe people can argue against why you should be doing something different, but you've at least done your job. Now, it should be the role of IT departments to be able to now help people do it more efficiently. And if they're not doing that, then they're not a good IT department.
Thank you, Steve. That's really helpful. I know there's a lot of other thoughts on this too. I see Matthew, you just had another comment in the chat.
Sorry, I've been away for a while and I can't help myself, but I was keyed off of what Steve was saying. You know, I hear innovative and disruptive, and well, you know, we're not all Steve Jobs, but we have things to do and there's increments to be made. And I actually have a substantive PhD, and there's an XKD comic where it was like, here's what PhD looks like. It's this little pimple on the surface of the sun. It's like, yeah, you're advancing things, and we're not all going to make those huge jumps. But now, adopting from some product management, you know, identifying, okay, everybody wants that huge jump, but we can deliver value along the way while offering this expertise. And, you know, then within my team, we've, you know, kind of stumbled on beginning like prototyping, working with IT and being like, okay, we can do this as a Shiny app, or we can do this is a script that gets to like the data artifact that we're talking about. And they say, yeah, I can understand that. We've gotten to the business needs and the supporting decision making, and then transform that and getting to these small bits, because it's like the whole scale upgrade of our platform likely can't happen anytime soon, but we can increase the value with these little bits at a time, and adopting like an MVP mindset and collaborating that way is starting to get some traction.
Thank you. I love this conversation happening right now. I know we're getting to the top of the hour, so I do want to make sure I didn't miss any questions that came through earlier in the chat or on Slido. So I'll give people a few seconds here to raise your hand. There was an anonymous question I missed for you earlier, Joe, which was, what do you do for fun?
Oh, what do I do for fun? Well, you know, generally right now it's just a lot of walking. I enjoy going seeing the sun. I throw a ball for a dog for a few hours if I can find some time. So those are my fun activities right now. Just getting outside, enjoying some weather when it's available. But other than that, it's primarily just like wrapping up studies right now for me.
Nice. And one other question for you, Joe. Do you have any podcasts or books or other resources that you'd recommend for us, or things that you're checking out now?
So I'll give you two podcasts that I really like. And maybe one's very math oriented. I really like the Breaking Math podcast. So that's something that I would definitely recommend. And then one podcast for more managerial stuff. My previous mentor recommended it. It's called Manager Tools. So I totally recommend that one if you haven't already seen it. There's also an and additional career tools. So that helps provide a little bit of guidance for, individuals, not necessarily managers looking to advance their career as well.
Awesome. Thank you. I was trying to put them into the chat there before I forget them, but maybe I'm not putting the right ones, but I think they're right. But thank you all so much for joining today. Thank you so much, Joe, for sharing your knowledge and insights with us too. And Caitlin, thank you for joining. I saw your comment in the chat, your first time here. Glad to hear that you enjoyed it. And for anyone else who is their first time here too, we hope to see you back as well. Thank you for joining.